All right, everyone, I've got 1300 on my Casio, so I think we're about to get started. Thank you for joining us here for another one of our ForeFlight forums here at AirVenture. So this is our post-flight features in ForeFlight. This is the fourth forum, maybe fifth forum already, we're doing here at Osh. If you were here yesterday, you probably saw me up here going through ForeFlight power users. This morning we had a pre-flight in ForeFlight forum. This is kind of sort of meant to be the companion to that. Yesterday, in addition to our power users, we had our ForeFlight fundamentals, which is those two are also meant to be companion pieces. So what we're going to talk about today, I'll show you an agenda in just a minute, is effectively how you can use ForeFlight once you're done with a flight. So you've landed, how can you use ForeFlight, and everything you need to do once your aircraft is shut down, how you can leverage ForeFlight to increase your efficiency, and everything that goes along with that. So my name is Jeremy Lippard. I'm a member of the customer education team at ForeFlight. There are three of us. Thomas is sitting to my right. He is also a member of our team. At the end of this session will go more slowly, more deliberately than the power users and the fundamental sessions went. So if you'd like to follow along with me, you should be able to. I shouldn't be going so quickly that you get lost really easily. You don't have to follow along, but if you'd like to, feel free to do that if you have your device with you. I do anticipate having time at the end of this for Q&A. It will either be like this, I'll just ask you to ask me a question. Depending on how long I go, I may just be tearing down for the next presenter and I can talk you off to the side. Or you can come visit us in the booth and any one of the ForeFlight employees be glad to talk to you about a specific issue you may have, a specific question you may have, or if you have a feature request, really anything you want to come talk to us, please go ahead and do that. I do want to start with a brief overview of our subscription tiers. So I'm assuming that everyone in here is a ForeFlight user. If you are not a ForeFlight user, these are the subscription tiers available to you. At the lower level, this is our basic subscription plan. All of these say a monthly price, but they are billed annually. I just broke it down monthly to make it a little more palatable. Our basic plan is billed at $120 a year or $10 a month. That's essentially, well, it is the essentials, everything most pilots would need, the bare basics for flying. We recommend that if you are a student pilot or if you're primarily or only flying VFR, Basic Plus is probably for you. If you're an IFR pilot and or operating in an area with some dangerous terrain, we typically recommend Pro Plus. Performance Plus has a lot more bells and whistles. If you'd like to see any specific feature, I'd be glad to demonstrate that for you. I just want to give you an overview of how our subscription tiers work. If you don't know what subscription you have, if you have your device on you, if you tap on More, tap on Account, you'll see what your subscription is. You'll also see the expiration date. All that stuff will be displayed. So, all right, so with all of that out of the way, you're here for post-flight features in ForeFlight. My agenda for this afternoon is I'm going to start with a full stop landing. So these are imagined scenarios that I kind of drummed up to make sure I can highlight these features in particular. My imagined scenario is going to start with, I've just completed a flight, I've taxied off the active, and that's where I'm going to start. So how can ForeFlight be used starting from that moment? So that's going to be our full stop landing. Then we're going to progress to how we can use ForeFlight to log our time. So I've done my full stop. I've taxied off the active. I'm going to go through everything ForeFlight can help me with about taxiing back to my FBO, shutting down my aircraft, all of that. Then I'm going to go through how I can use ForeFlight to log my time. And then lastly, I'll talk about features available to me to debrief a flight. So I can look at my performance, I can look at my statistics, I can look at and compare with others maybe how I flew a particular flight on that day. So I'll start with my full stop landing. In this scenario, again, I've imagined I've completed a flight and I've taxied off the active. How can I now use ForeFlight to efficiently basically complete my mission, shut down the aircraft safely and quickly? So we can see here I have my GPS enabled. There I am, clear of the active at Juliet. And I'm going to start going through all the processes we need to do after completing a flight to make sure we're keeping track of all our hours, everything we need to do. The very first thing I'm going to do is use my checklists So I'm going to go ahead and tap on my checklist icon. If this is the first forum you're attending, you'll notice we have these little animations here, and these are just meant to make it easier to follow along. The video in here isn't the clearest, so we try to do this to highlight exactly where it is I'm speaking about on the application. So I've cleared the active, just landed, and I'm going to open up my checklists. So if you've never used the checklist feature in ForeFlight, many of you probably, maybe, still use paper checklists, still use the POH. You can use ForeFlight for that. And the idea is you can effectively eliminate paper from the cockpit and just use ForeFlight for all those functions. This is what I do. I do use my after landing checklist in ForeFlight. I have it on a knee board. The second I'm clear of the active, I called into ground to make sure there's nothing bad going on. I open up my after landing checklist and run through it that way. So we've already completed, you can see I've already used this. If you've never used, I'm just highlighting this, you've never seen it. I've already completed my pre-flight checklist. This records that I've already completed it until I manually reset my checklist, but I can see that I've done this. How many of you use the checklist in ForeFlight? Okay. Of those people who do, how many of you have customized your checklists? Okay, so it's something, if you're not using the checklist in ForeFlight, you can customize them to match how you fly. So I have several custom items in my checklist. I have a checklist I built that literally says before leaving the house. That's just step by step what I want to make sure I have done before I leave my house. And that's charge my backup battery, make sure I have batteries for my backup radio, little things like that. This can all be done in ForeFlight. Again, the idea is to eliminate really anything other than ForeFlight in the cockpit. So you might not be able to see those items on here, but I do have, trying to see if you can see them, you cannot, but I do have several custom items in my checklist. I'm just going to navigate over to my after landing checklist. I'll go ahead and tap on after landing, and I can work through this checklist. Again, it's not very complex. It takes me 2 seconds to do, but I am still making sure I'm following that checklist. So you can, if you've never used the checklist, and it seemed like at least 40% of us haven't, you can tap on the individual items. You can just tap on those radio button, transponder, comms, electric fuel pump, whatever, and ForeFlight will register, yes, this is completed. So just like a paper checklist, go down the list, go through the checklist. There is an additional option to speak, and if you select speak, ForeFlight will read it out to you. So as if you had a copilot reading you the checklist, just tap speak and ForeFlight will read it out and say in a fancy computer voice, transponder. And you hit check, and then so on and so forth. You can also use, let me go back, I'm sorry, you can also use this check button on the bottom right-hand corner, whatever you're gonna do. I'm just gonna go ahead, I completed my after landing checklist, there was no anomalies, everything's good to go. So there's a few different features in ForeFlight we can use to help us taxi to wherever we're going. Taxi to an FBO, taxi to the fuel pumps, taxi to a tie down or hangar, whatever it is we're going. I'm gonna show what those features are and how those are available. And there's different ways we can do this. So this workflow I'm showing you, if this doesn't work for you, there's other ways you can access this information. I'm gonna start by just navigating back to my Maps tab. So I'll go ahead and tap on Maps. I'm still on the exact same area I was. I've just zoomed out a little bit. I'm clear of the active at Juliet at Georgetown, Texas. That's my home airport. This is a feature that has always been in ForeFlight on the aeronautical map layer, but not everyone is aware it exists. And when I show people it, sometimes like I didn't know that was there. And if you're following along, you can pick any airport and you'll see this. As long as the aeronautical map layer is active, when you zoom in, the airport diagram will appear on the map. You don't have to load a plate, you don't have to load anything else, just zoom in and you will see that on there. So you can use this, again, to start preparing and planning where I'm going to taxi to. If it's an unfamiliar area, maybe, or unfamiliar airport, maybe you can use this to get an idea of what the taxiways look like. So I've just zoomed in on that. I can see all the taxiways. I can see the runways. It might be a little bit difficult to see with the lighting, but you can see the hotspots on here too. So all of this information is there. You just zoom in on the map. Again, this is my home airport. I know exactly why that's the hotspot, because the pumps are located just east of that taxiway alpha. So that's where the hotspot is. So again, this is on the aeronautical map. You didn't do anything else. I just went ahead and zoomed in. So what I'm looking at now is as long as this layer is displayed, you have to have the aeronautical layer displayed. That's how you can see that. You can start leveraging some of the tools here. And what I'm going to do is, again, in my pretend scenario here, although this isn't really pretend, I do this quite frequently. You're clear of the active, you're at Juliet, you contact ground for your taxi instructions. Typically, you may use a piece of paper, write down those taxi instructions, whatever your methodology is. This may help you, and I'm just hoping to introduce these tools to you. Maybe they work, maybe they don't. We can use the annotation tool. This might be easier with an Apple Pencil. I just use my finger, but you can use the annotation tool to draw on the map. So as you're getting read those instructions from ground, you're getting read your taxi instructions, you can go ahead and just sketch that out and then do the read back. And it's all here in ForeFlight, it's all here on the map. I just activated my annotation tool and sketched it out, Alpha, Echo, Hotel, Charlie. Again, very simple tool. You can just use your finger, just do that. As a heads up, this happens every show, and I just want to mention this. These annotations will stay here until you erase them. So every show we have people come up to our booth with their iPad or iPhone, and they tell us like there's a bunch of red marks all over it, and they don't know how to get rid of them. So what happens is sometimes people will accidentally hit the annotation button, try to swipe the map, and accidentally draw a line. You do have to manually erase this. So if this is something you're using for what I just described to help with taxi readback, just know when you're done, just erase it, because otherwise it will always be there. And you can erase it just by tapping on the clear button, the undo button, or the erase button at the top. So after you finish this flight, you can go back, reset everything back to normal. So again, I can get my taxi instructions from ground, I can trace along the map as I'm getting those instructions, and I can do my readback. There's a similar workflow to this. Again, that's one way. All I did, zoom in on the map, annotation tool, traced where ground told me where to go. I'm going to look at a different tool for that. I've navigated over to my airports tab along the bottom. I'm going to revisit this view a little bit later, talk about some of these other tools. What I want to look at now is in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 3D view in taxiways. I'm going to go ahead and tap on taxiways. And that's going to open up my airport diagram in my plates tab. So I didn't actually navigate to my plates tab. You can see I'm in my plates tab because plates is highlighted right here. And that opens up my airport diagram there. We can see my GPS position is still being received. I'm clear of the active at Juliet. And I can see exactly where I'm at on that airport diagram. Same exact thing I just showed you in the aeronautical map can be done here in my plates tab. So if you prefer this, you can do this. I'm going to open up my annotation by tapping on the pencil icon. In this case, same exact thing. I'm just tracing along with what I was told by ground was going to be my taxi route. I also annotated with the letters of the taxiways. Maybe that's my preferred working. So I traced what they were told me, Alpha Echo Hotel, and then I also notated Alpha Echo Hotel. These annotations will also stay on this plate. So if you are a Pro Plus or Performance Plus subscriber, and you typically view your plates on the map, when you upload this to the map, you'll see those annotations on there. So just be aware, if you're using this workflow, we will automatically save these annotations. But this is one way, an additional way, you can use ForeFlight for after landing taxi instructions. So so this is all my plate on the map. I've made those annotations. Again, if I am a Pro or Performance Plus subscriber, I can send this to my map. I've just tapped on Send To, then I'm going to go ahead and tap on Map. And if you notice in the lower left-hand corner, I have those little bubbles that are basically telling you what subscription tier these features are available at. I realize now in the glare, it's not as obvious as it was on my screen. This is unavailable on Basic Plus, so that's why that's grayed out. If you can't tell it's grayed out, that one's grayed out. But I'm going to send this over to my map just by tapping on that. And then that plate, geo-referenced, will be displayed on my map, complete with my annotations. So this is something you may have used if you're an IFR pilot, putting an approach plate on the map, annotating vectors to finals, something like that on that plate. This works this way too, just an airport diagram. I've marked down my taxi route, both tracing it physically on the map as well as the taxiway letters. So I want to look at some additional features here. I'm going to navigate back to my plates tab, just tap on plates. I've just erased my annotation, so I'm starting from scratch. So I'm just viewing my plates tab. I'm still on my exact same airport diagram. I haven't moved. My airplane is in the exact same location. So one of the other features If you're flying into an airport you're unfamiliar with, this may have a lot of utility to you. If you're flying back and forth to the same airports, you may never use this. But if you go someplace new, the FBO labeling feature may actually have a lot of utility. So I'm just going to tap on the FBO button in the upper right-hand corner, and then all of a sudden, on my plate, on my airport diagram, I can see where those FBOs are. So if I know, maybe before I landed, I know I'm going to meet someone at a location, I can get an idea of where that is. So I know, like, hey, where is Central Texas Avionics? There it is. So I can start to anticipate and start to think through, this is what my taxi routing may look like. So that's the FBO layer. It's in the airport on the plates tab. Just tap on that and that'll pull up those labels. Again, if you're flying in and out of the same airport, you're probably never going to use it. But if you go someplace new and you want to know, I need to meet someone or go to this particular location, that might be some good situational awareness tools. So one of the last tools I'm going to show for taxi routing is available only to Performance Plus subscribers. So that's why those two buttons there have been dimmed. So if you are a Performance Plus subscriber, you have access to this next tool. I'm still looking at my plates tab. I've turned my FBOs off. I erased my previous annotations. And what I'm going to click on now is, you'll see in the upper right here, this taxi route button. I'm going to go ahead and click on the taxi route and just tap on that once. And taxi routes, this is a feature that provides interactive and contextually aware taxi route editing. I want to highlight, if you're following along, if you've seen this before, there's something that should jump out to you. At the very bottom of the screen here, I just want to make sure I highlight this out. This is advisory only. So whatever ground tells you, do that. Don't do what we are thinking ground will tell you, which is effectively what we're doing. We're going to try to predict what your taxi route will be. This is for advisory purposes, maybe to give you some situational awareness if it's an area you're unfamiliar with. And the way this will work, let me get rid of that. The way this will work, if you notice, my GPS is showing me at that same location I've been at the entire presentation, clear of the active at Juliet. If your GPS is enabled and you are on a field, you can probably do it now if you have this, your Performance Plus, and you want to see how this works. The prompt that will appear in this box is enter taxi destination. If you don't have GPS enabled or you're looking at an airport that you were not at, you'll see, I believe it says enter location. That's the first prompt. Then you enter destination, and then we'll tell you how we think you'll be instructed to taxi there. So because ForeFlight knows where I am, I'm clear of the active at Juliet, I'm just going to tell ForeFlight where it is I'm going. I don't remember what I told them. Oh, there we go. I'm going to Awesome Aviation and Pilot Shop. I'll go ahead and tap on that. And what ForeFlight will do is populate this inset map with what we think ground will give you for taxi instructions. Again, this is advisory only. This can also help during readback. When you call ground, tell them your tail number, tell them where you're taxiing. And as I'm receiving those instructions from ground, I can just tap the taxiways I'm told to make that readback easier. So I can tap, I'm told, ForeFlight thinks we're going to be taxied Alpha Charlie Hotel. So I'm getting my readback and ground is taxi Alpha. I'll tap on Alpha. They'll tell me the next item. You'll notice my map has now populated with green because that is part of the taxi route I'm planning. The blue area is still what we think you'll be taxied. We haven't confirmed it yet. So I'm continuing my readback. Ground tells me it's going to be Alpha Echo. You'll see the route has changed. The only one that's confirmed now is Alpha Echo. This is where we think you'll be routed to next. I'll go ahead and tap on that. And now I have, let me go back, I'm sorry. I'll go ahead and tap on that and I have my readback. So I'm taxiing to Awesome Aviation and Pilot Shop via Alpha Echo Hotel. I have all this information here. Again, this workflow might not be for everybody. This is not a very complex airport, so I probably wouldn't use it here. If you're at an airport that you are unfamiliar with, that has more complex taxiways, this might be useful. I have used this at this airport when I'm departing on the runways that are not the usual ones used, because that taxi instruction becomes more complicated, has crossing or another runway. I do use that to help me with that readback. Typically, this airport, the readbacks are 2 taxiways. It's not very complicated, but on those occasions when we're asked to use another runway, this is very helpful, especially when I'm not expecting to have a complex taxi. So that's how this feature works. If you're a Performance Plus subscriber and you're listening to what I'm saying and you're like, I've never seen that before in my life, where does that feature live? This is something that is not enabled by default on your account. You have to turn it on, but it is included. And if you've never seen what I'm showing you, all I've done is I've navigated the More button, I've hit Account, and I've scrolled down, and you'll see there's a menu or an item here that says ForeFlight Labs. This is where we put features that are not by default included in every user's plan, but you have access to. So if you're following along, if you've never seen this, if you tap on that ForeFlight Labs, you'll see you can enable, again, if you're a Performance Plus customer, you can enable those taxi routes. If you'd like me to show you how to do this afterwards, if I went a little too quickly, I'd be happy to do that. This is only for Performance Plus customers. But once that's toggled on, you'll have access to that. So the last thing I'd like to look at, this is, again, my full stop. I've done my after landing checklist. I've gotten my taxi instructions, I've started taxiing, or maybe I've completed my taxi, back to my FBO, back to my tie down, back to my hangar. I'm just gonna look at some more information that's available to me. I'm gonna tap on my FBO button here in the upper right-hand corner. I'm still on the same airport, by the way, I haven't navigated away. And in our FBO tab, I can see fuel prices. You can do this pre-flight too. So if you're planning a fuel stop, you wanna get some idea for fuel prices at an airport, you can do this. Again, we'll see that, we'll see contact information, I can get a phone number, whatever it is I need. If I'd like to see additional details about an FBO, so in this case, I think I'm just gonna look at the additional details for the airport itself. I'll just go ahead and tap on that, and that will expand the details there. I get additional information. I can see any contact frequencies, I can see the phone number, I can see the email address. Again, my fuel prices are displayed here again. I also have the ability to check out the comments of other pilots and users. I'll tap on comments, and at the very top, this is a relatively new feature. We will post a summary of the comments to try to get to what is the most relevant thing pilots have commented on. Again, I fly out of this airport frequently. All of that is correct. Everything in that summary matches up to my experience. If you want to read the individual comments, you can. Out of curiosity, how many of you have posted comments on an FBO or airport in ForeFlight? Okay, it's a little more than I expected. All right, cool. So this is a feature, again, it's available to everybody. You may or may not use it. Now I want to go into logging our time. So we landed our aircraft, I used my after landing checklist, contacted ground, used those features to help me taxi back to the FBO. I've done my checklist for my engine shutdown. I've exited my aircraft. I've tied down, whatever it is I'm gonna do. I'm in the FBO, maybe I'm back at home. Now I wanna update my logbook, make sure everything is correct, accurate, and up to date. So this is our next section in our post-flight features. So I'm looking at my airport tab. I haven't navigated away. The first thing I'm gonna do is look at my track logs for the flight I just completed. How many people use the track logs? Okay, with your hand still up, how many of you do the auto record track logs? Okay, most people. All right, so track logs, for those who don't use them, you can have ForeFlight automatically record them for you. The short version of how that works is if you exceed 40 knots on an airport, the track log will start. The minute you decelerate below 40 knots on an airport, the track log will stop. You can also manually record them. I personally manually record them because the airport I fly out of, there's a road that parallels the runway that you can drive more than 40 miles an hour on. And on more than one occasion, ForeFlight picked that up as a track log because it said, hey, you're near the departure of a runway, you're going 51 miles an hour, track log triggered. And it got annoying. So that is just a design, it's how it is. So I manually record them, and what I do is I mentioned custom checklist. I mentioned I have the one before I leave the house. My starting engine checklist, I've customized it so the last item is turn on track log. And my stopping engine checklist, the last item is turn off track log. So I manually do that. So however you record them, what I'm gonna do is start looking at my track logs. I'm gonna navigate over to my track logs. It's here in the bottom right. If you don't see the track logs there on your device, just tap the More button. Any button you're looking for that you don't see will always be in the More menu. Depending on how your device is oriented, landscape versus portrait, iPhone versus iPad, the real estate available for the buttons changes. If you don't see it, it's underneath the More button. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up my track logs, and I can see this is the track log for a recently completed cross country that is displayed right here. And I'm going to use this as the source of any debriefing I'm going to do. These are displayed on the left-hand side of my screen in chronological order. They include the time of flight, the aircraft used, and the information source for that flight's track log. So I didn't do this on purpose. This was accidental, but it's kismet because it shows everything I wanted to show. As you can see my sources here, I actually have 3 separate sources for these track logs. They will be reported. I have Century Plus for this particular flight. For this flight down here, it's just using my iPad. So if you just use your iPad, we'll use that as the GPS source. If you're using a Century Plus or a Stratus or something like that, we'll record additional AHRS data that is not included in the iPad. And then you'll also notice that I have 2 different track logs that are recorded from a flight simulator. So this is part of what I'll be talking about on Saturday in the ForeFlight for Flight Sims. Either way, we'll show you the time of that flight, the source of that information, as well as the aircraft that was used in that flight. So I will look at some of the post-flight debriefing tools after I finish all my logbook entries and everything. But what I'd like to do is continue to just look at my track log. This is a debriefing tool, but since I'm here, I'm going to look at this now. If you're following along, you can do this with any track log. We can replay our track log. That's what the play button in the bottom left-hand corner is. Once you tap on that, I believe this is a video. Once you tap on that, you can adjust the speed of the playback. I think it goes up to 20x. You can see at any point in my flight what was my airspeed, what was the altitude of that. And you can scrub forward by putting your finger on that little blue button and moving it right and left. There's the video. So as this is playing, and you can see there's my altitude, there's my speed, that's where I was located at that point on the track log. Again, so this is kind of a debriefing tool, but since it's already here, I'm going to walk through that. And you can adjust that speed as needed. I think I have it playing 20x. That's one of the features you can do. You can also view a 3D review of that track log. This is neat more than anything else. If you get utility out of this, great. For most people, it's just really cool. On the lower right-hand corner of my map, I have my 3D button there. I'll go ahead and tap on that, and I can see a 3D review of that track log, and this will use that information that was recorded, in this case from my Century Plus. Workflow is the same. You can scrub through that track log, or you can hit play. So I just hit play on mine. This is playing from a third-person perspective. I can toggle between first person and third person. I can see my airports are displayed here, and my obstacles are too. The obstacles are harder to see, but there's some over there. So if you did want to replay this, again, this is more or less a debriefing tool, but this is all right there within the track log folder. For now, what I'm interested in, I'll revisit debriefing in a moment, is how I can start to log this flight, how I can push this to my logbook. There's a couple different ways we can do that, and the simplest way from this screen is just to send this track log to our logbook. So upper right-hand corner, that's my send to icon. That icon is found throughout ForeFlight. Anytime you see it, it means whatever you're looking at, you can send elsewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on my send to icon. You'll see all my options available to me here, other, OpenKML, ForeFlight.com. What I want to do is send this to my logbook. So I'll go ahead and tap on the logbook icon. What will happen is this will automatically generate a logbook entry and populate that with the data from the track log. This can all be edited. If for some reason your track log recorded incorrect information, maybe, like I said, it was actually an incorrect track log because you drove too fast near a runway, you can go in and manually edit this information. In ForeFlight, anytime you see a field with blue text, you can edit that. So you can go in, change the date. If for some reason it's off by 1/10 of an hour or something, you can go in and change that. If we recorded or somehow you fat-fingered in the wrong tail number, you can go ahead and change that as well. One of the things I want to highlight on the left-hand side you'll see I have all these draft entries here. This is another thing that comes up very often at shows, is how many of you use ForeFlight Logbook? Okay, quite a few. If you use TrackLog and ForeFlight Logbook, you may never have noticed that every time you record a TrackLog, we suggest that you use that as a logbook entry. So it is not uncommon, we're at a show, someone will show me their iPad, I'll look at their logbook, and this draft request will be 99 plus, because they've never approved any of the TrackLog entries. This is a setting you can disable if you don't want this to do this automatically, but it does. So if you've never noticed that before, if you're looking right now and you're like, oh man, I've got 38,000 draft entries here, that's where that will show up. So the reason I'm showing you this is I manually push the TrackLog to the logbook. I don't have to do that because it's automatically saved as a draft. So if I want to, this is this same flight, by the way. It's the 2.7 total hours. It's this flight because it recorded it as a TrackLog, so it's suggesting it as a draft. So I'm going to go ahead, and let me orient more data on this page first. So below that, we can see my summary of my logbook entries, all last 7 days, etc. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. And if I scroll down, I can see a currency summary. And if I continue to scroll down, there's my currency summary. I'll continue to scroll down. At the very bottom, I can see my logbook settings. So I'm going to open up my logbook settings just to show you how you can adjust these to match how you're using ForeFlight. These are all the options available to you. These include a configure fields entry. This allows us to edit which fields are included in the logbook entries, and you can add any custom fields. So if you're flying with a flight group and you have custom information you want everyone to include in the logbook, you can add this here. This is where you can add in any custom fields. What I'm concerned with, again, if you're not using the draft track logs as logbook entries and you're tired of them populating and showing the 99 plus, you can turn that off. If you look, we have an entry that says draft entry creation. I'm going to go ahead and open up my draft entry creation. And by default, this is going to be toggled on. So if I don't want this, I'll just toggle this off. Once this is toggled on, anytime a track log is recorded, ForeFlight will suggest that as a draft entry. So if you'd like to do all this manually, just toggle that off and then go through and manually enter in your logbook information. So I'm back here where I was earlier. In this example, I'm just going to use my draft entry, and it's very simple to do so. I'm just going to open up my draft entry by looking at my draft entry. Any of these fields can be edited, like I mentioned, anything in blue. So if the time is incorrect, if the total time is incorrect, right now you'll see the total time is reported as 2.7 hours, but the PIC was left blank. So I can tap on use 2.7 because that's the total time, and that will auto-populate that field. If for some reason this is a different value, I can just tap on the 0.0, use the pop-up keypad to manually enter in the time. I'm just going to use 2.7, and that will fill that field in and adjust this data as needed based on how you flew. I'm going to continue to scroll down just to look at some of the editable fields I have here. I'm not going to go through each one. If you're an IFR pilot, we can add approaches to the logbook entry. Just tap on that approach field there. Continuing to scroll down, we have some other options. This allows me to add passengers to my logbook entry, allows me to add photos to my logbook entry. If you're a student pilot, you can have your instructor sign directly from here. It's very easy to do. Effectively, they just enter in their license number, and then they'll sign it on the device with a finger or an Apple Pencil. So this is how you can enter in manually all that information. If you prefer to use the draft entry instead, just tap on any draft entry. Exact same window pops up. The difference is at the very top, you're asked to approve or delete the entry. So if I know for a fact that, hey, this draft entry, it's kosher, it's good to go, I'll just go ahead and tap on approve. I don't need to do anything else. Until approved, none of these will be in your logbook. So in my example here, these sim flights are not populating my logbook. They're just there. I can add them if I want to. I'm not going to, because this is a flight sim on an iPhone. I'm not going to add those to my logbook, but they're there if I want to. If you want to delete any of these entries, just scroll to the left and then tap on delete, and that'll get rid of them. So just tapping on that and then tap on approve, and it will be approved. So if you were flying a multi-leg flight that were recorded as separate track logs and you wanted to combine them into one logbook entry, this is fairly easy to do. You'll notice there's a field right here that says add change track log. We can just go ahead and tap on that and then select the track logs you would like to combine into one entry. For my example, I'm going to tap on the track logs for my flight sim. On June 20th, it was 0.4 hours and 0.5 hours. I'm going to combine those into one entry. I'll tap on both of them. And now I have a combined track log that's showing, in this case, my multiple legs on the simulator. But this works, if you're not flying a simulator. Obviously, if you're flying a multi-leg flight and you want to combine those track log entries into a single logbook entry, you can do that right here. Just add, edit track log, and you can go ahead and do that. If you want to remove segments of the track log from the logbook, you can do that in the edit track log as well. So returning back to my logbook entries, I do have the option to manually enter in any of these items if you prefer. If you don't like using the track log, if you would rather just do all this by hand, those options are available to you. Top left-hand corner, you'll see a plus sign. Go ahead and tap on that, and you'll see the options there. My options there are to manually add a new entry or enter in a return entry. If you select return entry, ForeFlight will autofill the aircraft departure and destination airport fields using the information from whatever the prior entry was. I'm going to do a new entry. I'll just go ahead and tap on that. This workflow should be really self-explanatory. I'm just going to manually edit these fields. Just go through, what are my hours, how many landings, who's the PIC. Just go through and manually edit that, and that can all be done in the app itself. So I'm back in my logbook. I want to take a look at some of the organization tools I have available to me. At the very top of my screen, you'll see logbook filters. Above that, you'll see a summary of all my entries and all my time is at the very top of that. If I'd like to filter this down for specific entries, just tap on the filters option. We have our filter by. Again, should be pretty self-explanatory. I'll quickly walk through a couple of these. I'm going to filter by aircraft, so I'll tap on aircraft. I'm going to tap on tail numbers, and I have multiple tails saved to my logbook. Maybe I want my logbook entries for one specific tail, so I'll go ahead and tap on that. In this case, this is our 18 Lima Whiskey. And the filter has been applied, and I can now see that I have 4.5 hours in that aircraft. And you can combine these filters, do as much as you want. This is obviously going to vary in use for each individual pilot. I'm going to reset these and just preview another filter really quick. You can reset them by just tapping on the X. I've reopened my filter options. I'm now going to filter by my add-ons. You can see all the options I have available there. These can all be combined and stacked to create a complex search. What I'm going to do is just filter for anything related to flight review. I'll tap on flight review, and I can see, again, at the top, I have 2 entries, 4 hours of total time of flight review logbook entries in my logbook. Do the same thing with more filters. I'm going to filter by flight. The options available to me here, I can filter to show how many night flights I have. I can filter to show a particular airport, departure airport, destination airport. Was I PIC? Was I SIC? Whatever. In this example, I'm going to filter to show my night flights. And just like before, I have my entries and my time is posted at the top of the screen. So I'm going to look at some more logbook features because that's where we're here. I want to look at our reports really quickly. I've just tabbed back to my logbook. This is below my currency summary. I have a reports entry at the very top. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And from here, we can generate, view, and export logbook reports divided into 3 categories. Those are Part 60, General, Part 61, and Part 141. Any of these options will create a PDF. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a condensed logbook report, 1 page. That's going to include all my entries, certificates, and endorsement on 1 page. I can print, save, download, share, send to someone, whatever. Go ahead and do that. This is that condensed report. It's just as a PDF. You can also filter the reports to specific time periods. So right now, this is all time. It's the last 22 months or so. I can filter this down to a specific date range, and then I will receive a report showing those items. These will obviously vary based on choice, but you can see all my logbook entries. If there's additional comments, that will all be shown here as well. You do have logbook options available to you on the web also. So if you've never used ForeFlight on the web, this is something that every subscription level has access to. I'm looking at my website. On the left-hand side there's a logbook tab. I'm going to go ahead and click on my logbook tab. You have essentially the same features you had on mobile. A couple I like to highlight that are not on mobile that may have utility to you if you're transitioning from a paper logbook to an electronic logbook in ForeFlight. At the very top there, we have our import and export options. Again, this is helpful if you're transitioning from different logbook software. Look at the import option first. This will give you, you're not going to read all this now because it's tiny text, but this gives you the instructions on how you can import a logbook into ForeFlight. The short version is you can create a CSV, comma separated value file, upload that to ForeFlight, and it will be read and loaded into your logbook. The blue template button that's in the center of the screen, this will download a blank pre-formatted CSV. You can just go in and hand jam all your times, upload that to Logbook, and it will be populated with that data and viewable directly in ForeFlight Mobile and ForeFlight on the web. If you have a CSV file to upload, you will be able to see any potential errors. So you'll see a little warning there, and you can look at the details about, okay, what are those errors? You'll also be able to preview if your upload looks correct. So if you're uploading a CSV and that is way off, that number you know is wrong, you probably need to go back and look at the data in your CSV, make sure it's formatted correctly. The export option available across the top there, this allows you to export your logbook data as a CSV file. This will have the same exact format as the logbook template, and this includes any custom fields. This does not include things though like flight photos. If you added photos to the logbook entry, it will not include endorsements and signatures. So if you need access to those, use the logbook reports, print those reports or save those reports. All right, so we're close to the end. We've done our logging. I want to look at some of the post-flight debrief tools available to me. I'm back comfortably at home with a beverage, ready to reevaluate how I performed on my flight. I already looked at one of my track logs, so this is the one I'm going to use to debrief. I already kind of started the process. I scrubbed through, I played, I did my 3D review. Something I want to highlight, because the source of this was my Century Plus, anything you use that is AHRS data, you have additional data for you in the track log. By default, I'm showing altitude and speed, but if I tap on that layer selector, I can change that. I can see things like pitch and bank also. So if this is something you're concerned with, if you use a Century Plus or any other device that records AHRS data, we can show you that in the track log. So I just wanted to show that. What I want to do is click on my send to, I'm going to tap my info button first, and this is all the flight metadata if you wanted to see that. So I can see the total time, flight time, night time, all landings, average ground speed, etc. So what I'm going to do is send this somewhere else. I already sent my track log to my logbook. I'm going to use my track log to start doing some debriefing. Tap on my send to icon. And the other button here, this allows me to export this to anyone. So if you're flying with a flight group, or if you just want to show a friend or brother or sister or something, hey, I flew this cool flight, you can export this, send it via email, and that person will be able to open that up on any web browser. They don't need a ForeFlight account to view it, but they can see your track log. So if you're like, hey mom, look what I did today, there's my track log. She'd be able to see it, get an idea of how you flew. The metadata is all included, so that's nice. That's kind of cool. What I really want to look at, though, for my post-flight debriefing, I'm still on my Send To tab. You'll see this icon in the center here that says Open KML In. I'm going to tap on my Open KML In, and what's going to happen is ForeFlight is going to generate, let me go back, it was really quick. ForeFlight is going to generate an exportable KML file. Does anyone here use custom content in ForeFlight? Okay, a handful. So you guys using KML files and KMZ files? All right, so a KML file is a short version, is it's readable by any, say most mapping softwares. In my example, I'm using Google Earth. So what I did in my walkthrough is I flew my flight, exported my track log to Google Earth. This is what that looks like when opened in Google Earth as a KML. I can see my flight is now presented here in Google Earth, and you can use this to author custom content, You can export this as a KML. Other ForeFlight users will be able to see that in their device, and they'd be able to, for a flight, if you're flying in a group or anything, they'd be able to see what you did. Maybe you're the chief pilot, you want them to fly it this way. They could load that in as custom content. So one of the other things I want to look at in my post-flight debriefing, I'm going to go back to my send-to, back to OpenKML in. On my device, I have the CloudAhoy app loaded. Does anyone here use CloudAhoy? Okay, small group. I'll talk about what it is. It is free for 35 days, so if what I say sounds interesting, go ahead and download it, try it out, see if it's for you. So I'm exporting my KML, and I'm going to open that directly in my CloudAhoy app. This is a separate app, distinct from ForeFlight. It works on the web and on your device. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I'm going to if you haven't downloaded it, you can download this from the App Store. This is something ForeFlight acquired about a year ago. We acquired this. We're working to improve the debriefing process. As it is now, there is still a lot of capabilities for you. It's detailed post-flight debriefing, and this can provide a lot of useful insights for flight data analysis for individual pilots, student pilots, CFIs, flight groups, any of that stuff. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. If you'd like to see more of this, we have this set up in our booth also. And again, it's a 35-day free trial. So this is my track log exported to CloudAhoy. Immediately, some of the stuff you may notice, this is just the map of the track log in 2D. We have the ability to use this in 3D also. So just like the track log in ForeFlight, that's kind of redundant in its functionality. What I'm interested in, on the left-hand side here, you'll see there's a score. And that score is based on a rubric that's generated from the type of aircraft you're flying, and that's where we get what your speed minimums, what your speed maximums should be, and your score is based off of that. This is editable. You can customize this for how you fly, how you want your group members to fly, but you can see your score is right here, and we have the explanation of how that score was derived. We have additional information for that on the left-hand side. I'm going to expand that, and I can see it segment by segment. I can see how I scored on those individual segments. So this is something I use pretty regularly. You'll notice specifically, we can see, because I'm recording on my Century Plus, my airspeed and my glide slope into my destination. I can see all that there and see, did I do a good job? Is basically what I can see. It looks like my green solid line, which is my effective indicator, my glide slope, aligns pretty closely with the dash line. That's the target line. So I did that landing pretty well, I guess. So we can expand all this out, look at more information. That rubric will show up. Anytime you tap on a segment, this will show you the score for that segment, the data for that segment, and then push the track log to that specific segment of the flight. So you can just expand this into multiple segments. You can really dive down deep. You can create a group with other pilots where you can compare and contrast how one another is flying. You can use it to brag to one another or rag on one another if somebody's terrible. You can share that information with each other if you want. This next feature I'm going to show you in CloudAhoy is a different flight, but I didn't do this for this flight. So you'll get an idea of this. If you use something like a GoPro or a camera, you can sync that with your track log. So you can see, as my track log progresses, that's where I'm at. So if you wanted to revisit a specific flight, if you wanted to revisit, what did this base turn look like? What did this touch and go landing look like? What did this entry into this fix look like? And you have a camera, you can sync those together, and then from there, you can review your flight. So this is cool. You'll notice I even have this HUD is displayed over top, so you get an idea from the cockpit, what did this look like? Again, it's post-flight debrief. This can be used for analysis of how well you did. It's also some safety issues, safety features, things like that. This is also accessed on the web. This is that same version, web-based. The web has slightly more features, and that from here you can customize those scoring rubrics if the default ones don't work for you. But all of this can be used on the web, and this can be used for VFR and IFR flying. My examples were all VFR. This is a different example, but you can see we can look at IFR approaches, how those were scored, all of that information is presented in CloudAhoy. Again, can be used personally for debriefing, as an instructor, as a student, as a member of a pilot group. This is how this would look to a group. If you're an organization, you can see very quickly a summary of how your pilots in the group are flying. We can get an idea of were there any exceedances. So as a group, you set this is how we want people to fly. We don't want anyone to exceed this speed during this approach, whatever. If somebody busts that exceedance, as an administrator, you'd see it. They would, hey, we have people flying unsafe. We need to revisit this. So all of these tools are available in CloudAhoy. If you choose to take advantage of it, like I said, it's a 35-day free trial. It is owned by ForeFlight now. Hopefully we're going to do a little more with it, integrate it a little more easily, but it does work. It's a pretty good flight data analysis tool for post-flight debriefing. I had mentioned you can edit those scoring rubrics. This is what that looks like. So you can see this is all how this is weighted, and you get the idea here of what do we want airspeed, et cetera. You can go through, edit this as much as you want. So that brings me to the end of my scripted comments. I'll have about 10 minutes for questions. I want to quickly go through some ways to learn more. We're going to have several other forums throughout this week. The pilot's guide in the app in ForeFlight is always the best place to go. If you've never downloaded it, I encourage you to do so. It's the POH for ForeFlight. You can open it up in the app itself. Just search for what it is you're looking for. So if you have a question about Logbook, open up the pilot's guide, type in Logbook. You'll be brought right to where there's a summary of those explanations. We also recently launched the Discover tab. If you do have the newest version of ForeFlight, you should have noticed this. From the Discover tab, you can access our video library, and you'll see here it's broken down into different categories. You can do this directly within the app. So if you prefer to learn via video, you can do that here. You can also contact us at team@foreflight.com. We have those business cards up here too. That is our pilot support team. They're all pilots. They're all ForeFlight experts. Anything you need to know, just ask them, and they would be more than happy to help you out. All right, I guess I'll jump into Q&A now.